All right. So it's 5 o'clock. We'll jump in. We are reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are on the chapter called Sri Ramakrishna at Shyampukur. And if you remember last week, got to talk about two of Ramakrishna's parables that are my favorite, actually. One was the white cloth that gets dyed in the same bucket, and the bucket produces whatever color the person asked for when they dyed that cloth in it. And we talked about how that was what? Anybody remember what is the cloth represent? Anybody remember? That the cloth is your mind, right? And what's the bucket of dye? It's this world. It's what we do with our mind during the day. And that determines really how we experience life, how we see ourselves, how we see the world around us. Because it's really an amazing thing. We're born into a world we know nothing about. And the things that we're told about it are very rudimentary. This is your body, you have to feed it, this is how you dress it, this is how you clean it, this is where you go to school, this is how you keep feeding it, the jobs you get and the ideas you come up with in this world. But we are never really talking about what's going on. Where am I? Who is this? What is this reality that we're experiencing? And why can't we seem to find a deeper and abiding peace here in this? And so Ramakrishna was telling us, it's what you do with your mind. If you invest it in items of this sort, then you interpret the world in that way. If you invest your mind in these things, you interpret the world in that way. It's very much in how many assumptions that we make based on the things we've placed in our mind, that we are unable to see the moment as it is at this point in our life. We interpret it as our mind tells us that it is. So we don't really actually see the world anymore. We see our thoughts about the world, and we interpret it based on habit quite often. And that this chameleon that he was talking about, remember the story was that several wise men went to the forest, and each of them saw this creature that lived on this tree, and one said it was orange, and the other one said, no, I saw that same creature, it was green, and the other one was like, no, I didn't, no, it was blue, right? And so they go to the tree together to see the creature to find out who was right, and they meet a sadhu who sits under that tree to meditate all the time. And he says, oh, all of you are right, it's a chameleon, sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's green, and then he makes a statement, sometimes it has no color at all. And so we see that God appears as many things to us. He meets us as our own highest ideal. It's our devotion, as we're going to read today, that gives God form. The ultimate truth is that God is one without a second, that there is no form there. He is of the nature of Satchitananda, the nature of love, the nature of being, the nature of wisdom. But that he's a noun, or she or that is a noun. And you and I and this world are the verb of that divine principle. So God is love itself. He or she is not loving in that sense. He, she, that is love itself. That God does not exist. God is existence itself as the divine principle, and that God is not intelligent. God is intelligence itself. And it's an important distinction because that, even in the Christian scripture, the book of John, which I'm going to start a class on actually this week, in the first chapter it talks about, that the Word, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And that little distinction right there is the same Vedantic distinction between Shakti and Shiva, between God, the absolute unchanging, and then the power of God, the manifesting power of God, which is this world, which is us and this experience. And so you and I, we don't have a purpose in life as such, because really there's no time. There is no past, there's no future, there's only now. We've never experienced a past or a future. We can only visit the now. We're always here, and it's always now. And so that divine reality prohibits a purpose in actuality. I mean, of course, we have a memory, so we've created an idea of past where we store all of our attachments, the things we liked. And we talked about how that creates a future for us because our memories interpret the moment for us and make the moment look like it's not perfect. We smell pizza, we suddenly want pizza, and the moment's not perfect until we get it, right? But the point of the matter is that the moment is always perfect to the soul, to the self. And our purpose in this life is simply to manifest our divine nature, to manifest that Satchitananda that God is the noun of. It's up to us to be the verb of that, to express a profound and deep love that's not conditioned, that's not withheld from anyone for any reason, that we give of ourselves freely, of an infinite source, that we have as much love as we feel like giving. As much as you give away, you'll have even more to give away afterward. And the same thing with our wisdom, to invest in this life and to act from that place of wisdom in the moment and to be wise. And then our own being, our very existence. And it has been a treasure to me, actually, a thing that I often meditate on and remember when I'm feeling that separation, when I'm feeling that emptiness or that meaninglessness that comes upon all of us at different times. To remember that my existence is my evidence of a pure and delightful intimacy with the divine, because God is the existence that I'm enjoying as myself, and that the love that I feel and the love that I'm able to recognize in the world around me and the love that I'm able to give is God. It is love, it is God that I'm showing and God that I'm sharing and God that I'm enjoying. And so I often tell people who don't believe in God, I say there's no need to believe in God, just believe in love. It's a little bit easier to believe in the existence of love, and they're synonyms. And so let's have a conversation about love instead of a conversation about God, which nobody knows what that is. It's an undefinable word. And so this is how we know of our intimacy with the Beloved, because the love which is in all of our arts, of all of their forms, and is all about the divine. And the thing that we're seeking out the most in our life is love, right? And then our ability to grow, our ability to learn from our mistakes. That is the wisdom of the divine that he, she, that has loaned to us. And it's that ability directly from the presence of God that allows us to transcend and to have a hope and to build an ideal in this world. So we left off with that, and Ramakrishna is picking up here. He says, yes, God has form, and again, he has none. Do you know how it is? Brahman, which is existence, knowledge, and bliss, or love, absolute, is like a shoreless ocean. In the ocean, visible blocks of ice are formed here and there by intense cold. Similarly, under the cooling influence, so to speak, of the devotion of his worshippers, the infinite transforms itself into the finite and appears before the worshipper as God with form. That is to say, God reveals himself to his bhaktas, to his lovers, as an embodied person. Again, as on the rising of the sun in the ocean melts, the ice in the ocean melts away. So on the awakening of knowledge, or jnana, the embodied God melts back into the infinite and formless Brahman. Right? And so this is why in this world some people are in love with Ramakrishna, some people are in love with Jesus, some people are in love with Buddha, some people are in love with Rama. That which is Rama and that which is Krishna and that which is Jesus and that which is the Buddha is all the same that. It is God appearing to all of us in a form through which we can recognize that we can find something to hug. Find something to know. We know where to look when we pray, right? Kind of idea. And so all of this variation in truth is not a difference in truth. That with these different appearances that God has made, Ramakrishna describes an avatar, or these incarnations of God, he describes them as a hole through which God can be seen. And what is that a hole in? It's a hole in ego, right? And so by looking at Jesus, you're seeing a person with no ego. By studying a Ramakrishna, you're studying a person who is not bound by their egoism, by their sense of the little self. And by looking through that hole of egoism, we see the nature of God. And we love what we see. How do we know that? Because we've remembered the name of every one of them for thousands of years. That shows you how much we love what we see when we look through that hole of egoism. And so God takes all of these forms, reveals himself to his lovers as an embodied person. The doctor answers, yes, when the sun is up, the ice melts, and what is more, the heat of the sun turns that water into an invisible vapor. The master, yes, that's true. As a result of the discernment that Brahman alone is real and the world is illusory, the aspirant goes into samadhi, right? Goes into that highest state where he's merged into that oneness. So let's break this up here. He says, as the result of discernment, right? The discernment means looking at things very closely and seeing them objectively, not letting your mind explain them to you, not looking for an analysis, but simply observing without any preconsidered idea. So to sit there and discern within yourself your thoughts, the way that your mind interacts with body, the way that body interacts with you, and how the mind interacts with you, right? And you notice how we talk about me and the mind as different. Why? Because the mind always has to present itself to me. If I was the mind, it would not have to present itself. I would not be able to look at it, objectify it, put it in front of me, and see my thoughts. So by necessity, if I'm looking at my thoughts or watching my thoughts, I can know that my mind is not me. And the same with the body. The body has to inform me when it's not doing well, when it feels sick. It gives me that little, tickle at the back of the throat, that little burning pressure behind the eyes, and you're like, oh Lord, here it comes. I'm going to get sick, right? It has to tell you its condition. And the fact that the body has to tell you its condition and you have to watch its reporting to you, by necessity, the body is not you. And so who is this observer is our question. Who is it that brought you here today that wants to know something? What is this experience of being that we have? And he says, as a result of this discernment that Brahman alone is real and the world is illusory, the aspirant goes into that highest state of knowledge, that highest state of being, a state that's actually not a state, but we just don't have a word for it because there's no language at that level that we get to see these things, right? Then for him, the forms or attributes of God disappear altogether. Then he does not feel God to be a person. Then he cannot describe in words what God is. And who will describe it? He who is to describe does not exist at all. He no longer finds his I. To such a person, Brahman is attributeless. In that state, God is experienced only as consciousness, by man's inmost consciousness. He cannot be comprehended by the mind and the intelligence, right? And this is the importance of diving deep in our practice. You need to understand through discernment, right? Not just through having some head knowledge, but a knowledge that comes from actually paying attention to your inner world, to how things are inside. To go inside yourself, close your eyes, and of course the first experience is just a red, mushy world. It's like, there's not much in here. What am I supposed to do? Right? But as you begin discerning and you start seeing how the mind interacts with body and body with mind, and you get a sense of a separateness from that, then so many things become open to you. One, you begin to experience your eternity. You'll notice that when you have a deep meditation, that you sit in there and then you come out of your meditation, you look and it's been 2.5 hours, you're like, oh my God, where did the time go? Right? That's that sense as you go deep within yourself, time stops. It doesn't keep ticking and passing, right? Because time belongs to the mind. Time belongs to the mind, causation belongs to the mind, and space belongs to the mind. The mind also conjures up the idea of a past, makes it up. It's only a concept. It has no existence. You can't show me the past. You can't prove the past to me. The past cannot be regained. And you say, oh, but I can tell you about it. Yes, but what is it when you're telling me about it? It's the present, right? It's no longer the past. And the same with the future. We use our future to produce our desires, to manifest our desires. That's what it's for. So the mind produces the idea of a future so that you can plan a way of getting $20 more for a bigger piece of pizza tomorrow, right? These ideals. And this idea of Brahman, the best way to understand or to think about Brahman, to put a handle on it, it's illegal to say anything about Brahman, first of all. It cannot be described because it does not have those triads that the mind requires. What are they? Those three that we just talked about, this time, space, causation, right? To talk about God, you have to cram him into time, space, and causation. There's subject, object, verb, right? The mind needs those three components to form a sentence, right? And then there's past, present, and future. Those three concepts. So all three of those triads are required by mind to conceive of something. And this is why we can't talk about God, why you can't give a set of attributes, or why the greats can't tell you what they see when they go into samadhi. Ramakrishna says, I wanted to tell you, but it was like mother was standing on my tongue. Nothing could be said, no word would come forth, because God doesn't fit within any of those triads. God is a one without a second. And when there's a singularity, the mind can't do anything with it. The mind can't conceive of it, can't even think about it. It doesn't have the components it needs to be able to objectify. And that's why spiritual life seems so difficult to us, because every other time that we want to learn something, what do? We objectify it, put it in front of our senses, and then begin poking at it, begin looking at it, begin listening to it, begin smelling it, maybe tasting it, trying to figure out what this nature is, what is this thing. But when it comes to spiritual life, when it comes to knowing this absolute truth, you can't use those tools, because God is the one thing that cannot be objectified, the one thing that cannot be placed in front of the senses, because he is the one that is behind the senses looking out through your eyes. He's actually the very essence of your life. And as you come to know this experientially, I'm not talking about just leaving it in the realm of theology or philosophy, but these are meant to be seen and felt and understood by you in your own person. That this is a subjective endeavor, because when you find God, Ramakrishna tells that story of the salt doll, a doll that's made of salt that decides it wants to find out how deep the ocean is. So it jumps in the ocean, it swims and it swims and it swims, and it keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller because the salt is dissolving into the water. And by the time it gets to the ocean and finally knows how deep the ocean is, there's nothing to swim back to the top to tell you and me how deep the ocean is. And so this is why it gets so nebulous when you get into these higher truths. They are things that can only be experienced by the seeker. They cannot be demonstrated, because that which you find out cannot be placed in front of the senses, cannot be observed in that way. Therefore, people compare bhakti, or love of God, to the cooling light of the moon, and jnana, the knowledge, to the burning rays of the sun. I have heard that there are oceans in the extreme north and extreme south where the air is so cold that it freezes the water into huge blocks of ice here and there. Ships cannot move there because they're stopped by the ice. Doctor: Then in the path of devotion, or bhakti, the aspirant meets with obstacles. Master: Yes, that is true. But it does not cause the devotee any harm. After all, it is the water of the ocean of Brahman, existence, knowledge, bliss absolute, that is frozen into ice. It will not injure you if you continue to reason, saying, for instance, that Brahman alone is real and all the world is illusory. This reasoning will awaken in you knowledge, or jnana, which, like the sun, will melt the ice of divine forms back into the infinite ocean of Brahman, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. So this whole point that he says here, Brahman alone is real and the world is illusory, how do we give that meaning? What is that saying? When you dream at night, this is my favorite, you'll hear me always talking about dreaming, because I've learned so much from discerning dreams and the experience of dreaming. When you fall asleep and you go into your dream, you're in a world indistinguishable from this one. Is it not so? I mean, you could see this, you could see everything, and you could chop it up into little pieces and put it under your dream microscope and see the dream cells and the dream piece components in there. You could see it all, but what are you actually looking at in your dream? Your eyes are closed, the room is dark, you've got the covers over your head, You've put your sleeping mask on. What are you actually seeing in your dream? What is it in your dream that becomes a piece of wood, that becomes the ocean, that becomes a mountain, that becomes the air, that becomes the distance between the mountains? Because it's all right here. Those mountains aren't 150 miles away. They're between your ears. So what is it that you're looking at? You're actually looking at Brahman. There you're getting a direct example for yourself how Brahman becomes everything. It becomes that wood. You can call it, instead of using Brahman and maybe tripping up on that as a spiritual word, just say dream stuff, mind stuff. What is it in your mind that shows you everything that you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell? It's Brahman taking the form of all of these things. And so one way of enjoying that and discerning this is to wake up in the morning and sit on the edge of your bed and touch your bed and say, this is Brahman as a bed. And you can touch it and say, good morning, Brahman, in a goofy sense. You're touching God. You are being intimate with God. So you touch it, address it as God. When you see the first person on your way out of the apartment in the morning, address them, beloved. Very good to see you, because that equally is God. He's Brahman in the form of person A. And so by discerning and going through and understanding that this waking world, Sri Nisargadatta in his great book on Advaita called I Am That, he says that the waking state is a waking dream state. And the dream state is the dream state, right? That you never actually have a direct experience of anything. It always comes through your senses and gets interpreted to you by your mind. And the mind creates this image, this that you're looking at right now. You're not actually seeing the post. You're seeing a constructed symbol for this post from the information that went into your senses and got interpreted in your mind and handed back to you as a vision of this post, right? But you actually cannot see this post because that light does not go past the back of your eye, right? You cannot actually have an experience of touching this because the touching is happening here, but the cognition is happening presumably up here. So you cannot have a direct experience of anything in this room. And that's the kind of discerning that he's talking about here. He's like, sit there and recognize these things, understand these things, think deeply about these things. Don't just say, oh, look, it's a wood pillar, I can see it. No, you're not seeing a wood pillar. It's impossible for you to see anything. You're only seeing your mind's symbol for wood pillar. So think deeper, go into it, and understand that it is the divine alone that has become all these things, that mind stuff, if you want to call it that way, or Brahman, if you want to use the term for it. But the understanding is that it's the divine reality, it's the one without a second, that in that dream of yours you can have a myriad of people, trees, cars, mountains, waters, oceans, planets, but it is all a simulation of that. Right? It is all one, Brahman, being fed through different senses and appearing differently through each of those senses. Right? So we're experiencing a unity, a one without a second. But what's the first thing that's happening? We're breaking it into 5 pieces. That's the first thing we're doing. We break it into taste, touch, smell, sight, sound. And from that, those 5 disparate pieces get put in boxes in the mind, and then the mind tries to reconstruct the whole, right? I say this almost every time I talk because it takes that much for it to actually settle into us. This unity that we're experiencing gets broken up, placed into boxes in the mind, and then the mind goes around trying to reconstruct that unity by relationship. Let's see, water is related to steam because of this, and steam's related to clouds because of this, and it starts trying to reconstruct, and that's what we call secular education, is studying the relative links between all the disparate pieces of knowledge that we've placed in the boxes of our mind, right? In the samadhi that comes at the end of reasoning and discernment or discrimination, no such thing as I exists, right? That's the capital letter I, not this thing. No such thing as I exists, but it is extremely difficult to attain it. I consciousness lingers so persistently. That is why a man is born again and again in this world. And you can see how difficult it is. And with all the dreams that I've had in my life, after 60 years, only 2 of them did I ever come to an awareness that I was dreaming, right? Every other time I believed that dream to be absolutely real. I had no knowledge that I was laying in a bed, sleeping somewhere else. I was just in this dream, and it seemed very natural to me, right? I thought that I was in the dream, and that dream could affect me. But in fact, that dream was in me, right? Because I was asleep in the bed. And that's what Swami Vivekananda said when he was in the city of Alameda. He says, I'm not in Alameda. Alameda is in me. So he was right then giving you the very important teaching that this world is a dream state, that it is not real in and of itself, that it is a symbol for something that's beyond your knowing, something that cannot be known by the particular and through the senses. So he says, the cow suffers so much because she says, hamba, hamba, that is, I. So she's saying that mu means I in this particular example. The cow is yoked to the plow all day long, rain or shine. Then she's slaughtered by the butcher. But even that doesn't put an end to her misery. The cobbler then tans her hide to make shoes from it, and at last the carter makes a string for his bow from her entrails and uses the string in carding, and then finally at last this sinew says tuhu, tuhu, that is, thou, thou. Only then does the cow's suffering come to an end. Right? So it's a fun little story there about how to find your happiness and contentment. It's to stop saying me and mine, and see others' needs, and see the value of everything, right? And to not hold on to the ideas of me and mine, because it's me and mine that gives you the delusion. It's me and mine that forms egoism. Egoism forms as a safety mechanism for you. Your ego is kind of like the floaties on your arm, right? To help you navigate a world that you know nothing about. A world that you can't understand, a world that you don't know its nature. And so you form an ego, a false sense of being in control, a false sense of knowing, this is what I am, this is who I am, this is my purpose, this is what I must do, right? But it's not there. And so it takes time to go inside and first undo the hypnotism, right? Undo the biases that you've learned and that the assumptions that you've made. Recognize what they are. Find out what they are. That's what discernment is about. Finding out, where did you get these ideas from? Who told you that was the way it was? And once you've taken it apart and understood that it's not real, you throw that aside, and then you keep watching and let it itself tell you what it is. Not your mind. Don't let your mind come in and think a thought and says, oh, this is what that is. No, because true knowledge cannot be spoken, right? That's why we have to dive deep and go deep within the mind, where you know what you are, not because your mind is telling you, because your mind requires those 3 triads, remember? And what you're looking at doesn't fit in those triads. And so it can't come from up here. That's why they talk about here, the shrine of the heart, right? The shrine of the heart is where we'll call it a symbolism of the one without a second dwells. Shiva dwells here, the unchanging absolute dwells here, and Shakti is the mind with me and mine in it. It's the changing world, the world of a constant flow of unrepeated change. That's the power of God. So the power of God is here, the mind with me and mine in it, and the divine absolute is before the mind, before the body, before the senses. It's the silence of the heart, the silence of the shrine of the heart. And it is where your love becomes manifest, comes to you. And so you find it through your mantra is one way. You know, you speak the name of God in your mantra, and the name of God is the name of love. That love manifests, and you follow that mantra. Follow that mantra like following a chain to the shore from a boat that's been tethered. You follow that mantra to its source to find the shrine of the heart. When you find the shrine of the heart, then you just sit in communion with this beloved, the divine beloved. You sit in that communion in absolute silence, And in that absolute silence, when you're not caught in the thoughts of the mind and you're not relying on sequential thought for your information, in that silence you know God. You won't be able to say anything. You won't be able to put it into a word because it doesn't have those three triads. But in that silence is knowing. It's the wisdom of being. And if you can find that place and you can pull yourself out of the changing world, the mind, the world of thought, if you could, the easy way to think about it is stop being a thought of yourself and start being. So don't be you, just be. Right? So don't give it any definitions in there. Likewise, only when a man says, not I, I am nobody, O Lord. You are the doer, and I am only your servant. You are the master. Only then is he freed from all sufferings. Only then is he set free. Right? When you, in the evening, when you're in your dream, when you come to in the dream, you say, hey, I'm not here. I'm in bed. This dream is within me. I'm not in this dream. These attributes, this I that I'm running around in this dream with has nothing to do with me. This is just tonight's menu, tonight's description of me. And how did I get to this new, I'm repeating myself all the time, but these things are so beautiful. They're so important for us to get a deep and abiding understanding of, that you become the dream self through pure renunciation, right? When you fall asleep and you enter into that dream, you renounce completely and utterly the body that's sleeping in the bed. You forget who it's married to. You have no idea where it goes for work. You don't know what it's wearing. You don't know whether it's hot or cold. You are a master renouncer. So when your mind tells you, oh, renunciation, no, I can't possibly do that, know for certain you're being lied to. You, by your nature, are a master of renunciation, right? And so think about that which is you in the waking state is that which is you in the dream state. So what is it that is shared between the waking you and the sleeping you? It's not the body, it's not the events, it's not the memories, it's not the happenings. What is it? It's that unnameable self, the sense of I, the sense of being, repackaged. And so pay attention, think about it. This is a wonderful meditation to try and find out what is the same between me in waking state and me in my dream state. What is that which goes back and forth between those two things but becomes and manifests two completely different worlds for me, right? That is the unchanging you. That is the real, the only thing that's real in all of this experience. It's the source of the universe, it's the source of your story, it's the source of your body and your mind, it's the source of every experience. But it itself is unchanging, absolute, pure potential, the potential of an infinite love and an infinite wisdom through an infinite being. And that is your nature. The doctor. But one must fall into the hands of the carter, right? The one that killed the cow and brought it all the way down to its entrails being a violin string. One has to fall into the hands of the carter. Everybody laughs. The master. If this ego cannot be got rid of, then let the rascal remain as the servant of God. Everyone laughs, right? Because it's a very difficult thing. And actually Ramakrishna says in other places that for normal folks like you and I, there's no way to get rid of the ego completely, the sense of I, the sense of separateness from the whole. There's not really a way to do that. So what's he say? He says, well, go as far as you can. Get that ego to be as thin as it possibly can get. And that little bit that remains, put it in direct relationship with the truth, right? Look through that ego and say, there's the beloved. There's the divine. He's my master. He's my lover. She's my wife. She's my child. However you relate to God, or want to relate to God. A man may keep his ego even after attaining samadhi, right? So even after knowing the highest, if one is one of the Ishvarakotis, or a very high spiritual being, he can come back into the body-mind. He can step back into this character. It's like having the ability to close your eyes and go back into the dream, right? Most of us can't do that, but those people of super high spiritual power can do that. They can leave the dream and then step back into the same dream, same place. So a man can keep his ego even after attaining samadhi. Such a man feels either that he is the servant of God or that he is a lover of God. Shankaracharya retained the ego of knowledge to teach men spiritual life. The servant ego, the knowledge ego, or the devotee ego may be called the ripe ego, right? So it's the ego that's not going to take you farther into delusion. If you make your ego motivated by love, make your ego informed by wisdom, and put your ego at the feet of your divine principle, then it itself will take you to God, right? If you get the ego that's a little bit too thick, well, then it starts telling you that you'd rather be Beyonce, or that you'd rather own a bigger car, or have a nicer house, or marry another person, right? And then you get into trouble, because the ego produces stories, and they're just stories. And you spend your whole life running after stories, until one day you can't run anymore, you can't find any more stories, and you start to drift off, dying, and you wonder, God, was any of this anything? Was anything real, right? And Ramakrishna is trying to spare us that sense of desperation at the end. He's like, no, there is something. There is something, but you have to really want to find it. You have to want it more than you want the stories. And that's the difficult part, because we really like our stories. We really like our plans and our dreams and our hopes and all those things. But those are not the things that fulfill us, right? Look at all the plans you've fulfilled in your life, and yet are you fulfilled? And look at all the food we've eaten, and yet are we full, right? And so the material world is like that, because the material world is a wrong interpretation of what it is. It is Brahman within a universal mind that all of us share a portion of. So your mind is not separate from my mind. We've taken a single mind and put a boundary down the middle, and you're allowed on that side, and I'm allowed on this side, and we carry on. It is different from the unripe ego, right? So this knowledge ego, this devotion ego, this ego that loves or serves God is different and is called the ripe ego. It's different from the unripe ego, which makes one feel, I am the doer. Now this is a thing, the highest truth, and Ramakrishna says it many times in the Gospel, that you are not the doer, right? That you are, Vivekananda fleshes it out a little bit in his writings, and he says all of us are under compulsion, right? It's like my famous example is that day when I was walking. I thought it was a perfect day, and then I smelled pizza, and then I thought I have to get some pizza, right? And then I went and got pizza, and I can tell you, at that time I think, oh look, I'm free. I can get pizza when I want to. I'm a free soul, not realizing that I'm under the compulsion of my senses, because my day was perfect until I smelled pizza, and then I was helpless. I had to walk all the way back to the monastery to get my Christmas money so that I could come back and buy that piece of pizza. I did all that work for what? I say for me, but me was happy before I smelled the pizza, right? So all of our actions are under compulsion like that. We don't choose to do them purely. We're always compelled to do them by our senses, by a memory of the last time we did it, right? By the promise of being able to do it again, or the plan to do it again. And so we're always under a compulsion. We're not actually able to act, right? We're watching it act. We're watching this play happen. So that's one way of thinking about it. The other way of thinking about it is you're in a dream, for crying out loud. Build as many houses as you want. When you wake up, they ain't going to be there. So who was the doer? And was there any doing at all? No, it was all play, all part of a story, a moving of gas, as it were, right? So it is different from the unripe ego, which makes one feel, I am the doer, I am the son of a wealthy man, I am learned, I am rich, how dare anyone slight me? A man with an unripe ego cherishes such ideas, right? He judges everything by what his ego has collected to verify his existence. I'm important because I'm rich. Well, what is that rich when you actually come down to it? What is money when you come down to it? But a concept of your mind, right? take your stack of dollar bills and go to India. You can't buy a thing with it there, right? Until you trade it in for rupees. Suppose a thief has entered such a man's house and stolen some of his belongings. If the thief is caught, all the articles will be snatched away from him. Then he will be beaten, and at last he will be handed over to the police. The owner of the stolen goods will say, "What? This rogue doesn't know whose house he's entered." After realizing God, a man becomes like a child 5 years old. The ego of such a man may be called the ego of a child, the ripe ego. The child is not under the control of any of these gunas, any of these compulsions. And I just realized it's probably a good time to come to a close there. But we got a couple minutes. Does anybody have a question or an interest? Yes.
If I'm making up the post, then why do most people see it and describe it the same way?
Well, we're in the same dream. We're using the same universal mind. So we're observing something. That's the, well, I don't know for sure that that's the difference between Shankaracharya and Ramakrishna, but I've gotten that idea from our speaker on Sunday, Maidananda, that the difference is that Ramakrishna says, no, there is something here, but it's not a wooden post. It's just like when you watch a movie, the movie is an illusion, but there is something there. There's the white screen, which is reflecting the colored light. So there is a reality behind this, but it's not the movie that's playing on it. This is the movie, knowing that this is God, that this is Brahman, a mind substance that has become all things. That's knowing what it is. Still not directly, because we also are that, right? So it gets complicated because both directions, outward and inward, go infinitely in that direction. It's not until you step out of completely that it betrays itself to you as for what it is. Collective delusion, absolutely right. Yeah. You know, I had one of those two dreams where I realized I was dreaming. I've told this story many times too. There was a young woman in that dream, an 8-year-old girl who was also, we were floating in inner tubes on Monterey Bay. And I realized I was dreaming, and I was kind of fascinated with how real everything seemed, what the resolution was of everything. It was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Why did I make that so old and ugly? But so when I paddled over to this young woman, she got offended at me for approaching her and treating her like an object, because I was more interested in how the water was manifesting in the pin hairs or curls on her right cheek. And so I was, looking at her cheek, and she's like, "Get away from me, you weirdo, what are you doing?" And I woke up laughing because that was so deep to me. Here was someone in my dream, which means they were composed entirely of me. It was my mind they were using for the existence, my nap that they chose to appear in. Everything that they were made of was my mind stuff. And she had a sense of self separate from me. She was offended at me for approaching her and touching her. And doggone it, that is the reality the scriptures talk about in this world all the time. Your egoism has separated you from the dreamer and made you experience the dream as real, right? And not to know your true nature as the one who is dreaming, the container of all dreams and no particulars. Right? All right, so we'll stop there for today. Let me give you a few little announcements. This coming Sunday, Swami Maitananda is going to be speaking on "Are You There, God? It's Me, ChatGPT." So that will be interesting, no doubt. Next Saturday, a week from today, Swami Ganeshananda, who's the head of the center in Berlin, Germany, is going to be here giving this class next Saturday. So if you want to come and hear some great wisdom from him, that'd be a great idea. And followed by potluck dinner, so there's food. Delicious food, always. All right, and I think that's all the announcements. We got the Wednesday class happening at 5 p.m., Glimpses of a Great Soul, given by our Swamini Krishna Prana, Pravrajaka Krishna Prana. And I just say that because someone has asked me, are you the first Swami here? And I'm like, no, you have a convent full of them. So there's just a different word for it. All right, very well. Let's take some time to have some good meditation together and to search our inner world.